Coach Staley there talking about the question that was posed to her right before she went into the championship game by one Dan Zaksheske, who is a writer and content creator for Outkick. And I'm so excited to have Dan on the show with us here today. Dan, I said this on the air yesterday. I'm going to say it to you first since I said it yesterday. I think she should have told you, I'm not answering that question. I'll answer that after the championship. Let's focus on what we have in front of us. I wish she would have done it and then gone harder into her opinion, because listening to her response there, Dan, I don't believe she believes what she said.
So first of all, thank you so much for having me, and excellent job on the pronunciation. My name has been getting butchered
I got
across.
it written right here phonetically, and I have been saying it out loud, practicing it. Thank
I
you.
know it has been just. I plan on doing like a cut up of everyone trying to pronounce my last
Well,
name.
I
think
want
that
to
was
be the bing at the end where I nailed it. Put that together.
Yeah, Iowa coach Lisa Bluter, who I also asked the question of, did elect to go that route. She said it was an important issue, but it was an important issue for another time, and that she had a championship game to worry about. And
I didn't know
she didn't
that
want
happened.
to comment.
I didn't know, Dan. I didn't know you that didn't cut through the noise of Dawn's.
What a shock!
Yeah.
Right? And I definitely had more than one or two people suggest that, there was some racial bias, that I asked Dawn Staley the question because she's the black coach, but I wouldn't ask the white coach, Lisa Bluter, which wasn't true. In fact, the reason that it happened the way it did is just because of how the press conference schedule works. On Saturday morning, because South Carolina had played the first game on Friday night, Dawn Staley was available first. So I asked her in her media time, and then Bluter, her press conference came later, and I asked her the same question. I asked both coaches. So I want that to be very clear.
Yeah, that is an important clarification. A, I didn't know you asked both of them. B, I'm even more impressed with Bluter that she just was like, no. But Dawn,
I think she was prepped.
Well,
they went to me first with Bluter, which they were not doing at any point during the week because obviously my affiliation. Not big fans of mine, not big fans of Outkick. My question to Staley was somewhere around 11th or 12th in line, I believe. And they went to me first with Bluter. So I think they knew and told her, hey, this question's probably coming, so be ready. Because her answer sounded very, I don't want to say rehearsed, but she knew the question was coming.
As an interviewer myself, Dan, when I am having people on, a lot of times, especially it's like during a campaign season, I always think, especially from somebody who's in a position of a politician or somebody who is in a position of representation of other people, which I kind of put coaches in there, that you want to have the hard questions be asked of you so that you have an opportunity in your own words to answer the question. And I also respect people who say, you know what, I'm just not going to go there right now. Just be open and honest with it. So what was your thought when you asked both of these coaches these questions, but specifically Dawn Staley, since she was the first one? Did you think you were going to get that kind of answer from the coach?
Well, let me say this. As an interviewer, you know this, and I've had so many people attacking me for asking the question in the first place. I get a lot of, you know what you were doing. No, I didn't. I didn't know what her answer was. You know why I didn't know what her answer was? Because she had never been asked that question before, which, by the way, I think is a dereliction of duty on people who are women's college basketball media reporters. Why did no one ever ask her this question before now? No, I had no idea what her answer was going to be. That's why I asked the question. When she said what she said, was I surprised? I was. I definitely expected the I'm not going to answer that right now answer. I thought maybe based on her religious views, there was a chance she would go the other direction. But I think her answer, quite honestly, surprised everyone in the room. And I think that's why a lot of the women's media had never asked her the question before. Because Dawn Staley, you have to understand, is pretty much the media darling of women's college basketball. They love her. She's a black woman. She speaks about racism. She speaks about sexism. And they love reporting on all of her opinions on plenty of topics outside of basketball, by the way. So all these people who are like, that question didn't need to be asked at this time. Like, okay, it's not important to ask a women's sports question at the biggest women's sports event of the year. That's ridiculous.
What do you make of, you already alluded to the racist implications that people were throwing at you for asking the black coach that, not the white coach about it. You might have heard me saying there, I coach, my daughter is 11 and she loves basketball. She's playing like year round right now. And she cares deeply about the sport. She has never had the opportunity to watch someone like Caitlin Clark and all of the people surrounding Caitlin Clark. And Caitlin Clark would be the first to tell you this. Like, there are a lot of good athletes on the floor that are helping Caitlin be better. Um, when when I'm watching my daughter watch this unfold, and then at the same time watching so much noise around this all boiled down to black and white. What's it like to be on the receiving end of that, as if you were a pawn in pushing this like racial concern? And what do you think that it's doing? What's the effect it's having to the popularity that women's basketball has enjoyed here recently?
Sure. So I ignore the stuff implying that I'm a racist because I'm not. So it's not really a big issue.
Yeah,
And again, if
simple.
anyone did a modicum of research, they would know that I asked both coaches and had planned to ask both coaches, and it had nothing to do. Of course, people are going to pay more attention to Dawn Staley because she's a bigger name. You might not have even known who Lisa Bluter was before this weekend or last weekend. Most people didn't. She's not a figure like Kim Mulkey, the
Mm.
LSU head coach, who also gets a ton of attention. She's not, because Caitlin Clark is the star of Iowa. Lisa Bluter is not. So her answer wasn't going to be as big of a deal anyway. So as far as racial implications, that's ridiculous. Do I think Caitlin Clark's skin color plays a role in her popularity? I do, but not for the reasons people think. Everyone likes to imply that, oh, America only loves her because she's white, or they desperately wanted a white star. No, what happened is Caitlin Clark is in a generally black dominated sport, and she's dominating. We did the same thing as Americans when Tiger Woods burst onto the scene as a black golfer in a traditionally white sport. It was something different. It was something
Mm.
unique, and it was something to be celebrated. So yeah, I do think her popularity is played into, but I don't think it's just because people love white people. I think it just has to do with the fact that, again, she's white playing against mostly black women, and a lot of the former NBA players, they're all like, I can't believe this white girl is doing this. Like, that's part of the story. It's part
Yeah.
of the story, but it's not the entire story. And I think that's an important distinction to make as well. Boiling it down to it's just her skin color, that's racist.
We're speaking with Dan Zaksheske, writer and content creator for Outkick, the one who asked Coach Dawn Staley the question about men in women's sports. And then we got that answer that we just played a little bit before from the coach. I mean, Dan, the hesitation on her willingness to answer that question, she did go on with and provide you the answer where she kind of backs her way into saying, yeah, men, or if you've, what'd she say? Identify if you feel you're a woman or whatever, you should be able to play. Do you feel like, just from being in the room, because sometimes you can get a sense when you're part of a conversation, if she had a second shot at that answer, would she answer it any differently?
I don't know the answer to that. What I will say is this. Part of me feels like Dawn Staley thought she owed me an answer, and I'll tell you why. The week before, I covered the Albany regional. I'm sorry, Albany. They get mad when I say Albany. The Albany regional, which included Dawn Staley, included Iowa, included Caitlin Clark, and surprise, surprise, I was the only. Dawn Staley's very open about her Christian faith. She's
Yeah.
very open about it, and they won their Elite Eight game to advance to the Final Four on Easter Sunday. And I asked her if it carried any extra significance for her winning this game on Easter Sunday. And she gave a very thoughtful answer about not wanting to praise God only for wins, but that, she also needed to give glory when her team loses. And I wrote that story because that to me was really interesting. And I think she appreciated that a media member would ask about that. Because remember, as I said earlier, the left-wing media, which is mostly what comprises women's college basketball
Yeah.
reporting, I put that in air quotes for the listeners, is hardcore left-leaning people. They love the racism talk. They love the sexism talk. They don't want the God talk. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to talk about it. They pretty much just ignore it. But I think it's interesting. It's part of Dawn Staley's story. And so I do think I built a little bit of a relationship with her the previous week when I asked her about that. And I wrote about it. And I'll add to that as well. I think a lot of them expected me, because obviously Dawn Staley won, and so she had a post-game press conference, which came the next day. I think a lot of those people thought I either wouldn't show up or not pretty much that. I think they thought he's going to run, hide. You know what I did? I sat in the front row, right in front of Dawn Staley, and I listened to her entire interview. I raised my hand to ask a question. The NCAA moderator pointed at me and said, I got you, like, you're on the list. Never took my question.
Wow.
Never took my question. But I went up to Dawn right after she was done, and I said, Coach Staley, I'd love to just get a quick quote on something you talked about with me last week, that your faith was a little shaken last year because, of the loss and you didn't understand why. Could you just talk a little bit about that? And Dawn Staley answered the question, even with the South Carolina assistant, like, hey, we got to go. We don't have a lot of time. She's like, I want to answer this question. And so, that's important. I think people think about reporting as you need to like suck up to athletes and coaches to get them to talk to you. But that's not true. You just have to be honest with them. You have to ask questions. And sometimes they're going to like the question. Sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
And so I do think building a little bit of a relationship with Dawn Staley, who has blocked several Outkick members who have tweeted at her. She didn't block me. Like, I don't think Dawn Staley is mad at me. I don't think she hates me. I did my job.
Yeah. Dan, I just have an inkling that the answer that she gave it just felt like the one she thought she was supposed to say. It didn't feel genuine. And I'm a fan of hers. I'm a fan of course, her career, but also the things that you're talking about. Like, there are a lot of very positive things to say about Coach Staley. And I hope that I don't know if you're going to be involved in the next installment of this story or this series with the coach, but I think there's a lot to be said for somebody who felt pressured to say a certain thing, knowing full well what the implication of her words, suggesting, it's not just about men, transgender women, men who identify as women coming in and having a fair shot to compete. Which of her girls on her team wouldn't be there so that mediocre male athlete could compete on an unfair set of terms and standards? Like, I just feel like there is more to that story, and I don't know if you're going to be able to get it or how that's going to unfold, but I think that there would be great power if she wasn't feeling that was 100% where she was. And the only reason I say that is because if people haven't seen the whole clip, you asked the question, Dan, there's an uncomfortable amount of hemming and hawing. She takes a drink in the middle of it, like a la Marco Rubio.
Damn, you got deep on me. That was the first thing she said. Damn, you got deep on me before she took a sip. And then, yes, she hemmed and hawed for a moment. And I think you're right. In that moment, she's contemplating, which direction do I go here? Do I say what I think I'm supposed to say? Here's the thing. I'm not in Dawn Staley's head. People keep asking me, like, what do you think I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if that was her true answer. I don't know. And that's not my job. My job was to report the information and then let other people decide. I report, you decide. That's kind of the credo that I try to live by. I let other people decide. Now, I will say that part of my answer to that, though, is it doesn't affect her right now. There aren't any current transgender athletes in women's college basketball. Perhaps she thinks there never will be, and this won't really be an issue. So she could give this answer and get her brownie points from the left-wing media, and then that would be the end of it. But it's coming. We're seeing high school transgender girls playing high school basketball. I mean, there was a story, I don't know if you've ever talked about it or seen it, a couple months ago, where a team literally had to forfeit because a transgender girl injured 3 players, and the other coach was like, I don't have enough players. Yeah, we're done with this game. So it's coming. It is coming. And to all those people saying to me, this wasn't the time and place, it was exactly the time and place. When do you want to discuss this? When it's actually happening? Mm-hmm. When there's actually a biological male in women's college basketball dominating? Or do we want to talk about this before it happens and get ahead of it? Yeah. See, that's the problem. We live in this reactionary culture. We need to be proactive.
We're midway
That's
down.
Why it's an important topic.
We're midway down the slippery slope, and there's no going back up. We're going to have to decide what we do when we get to the bottom of it. And, the Coach Staley famously practices against boys, like the highlighters, the people who help make South Carolina such a strong women's basketball program, is that they play against men that are, at their practices in order to make them better. Like, what if they all decide to be women? They're going to not just win the women's basketball championship the way they do. They're going to do it in such a dominating fashion that it would be incredibly unfair. She has to know that. She has to know that. I have a lot of faith in her, and this was unfortunate to hear. But I do think if we're able to get to the point, I have a lot of patience and grace for someone who comes out and says, listen, in the moment, I tried to protect my girls. Strange that it would be the less controversial thing to say right now, to be like, let them play. But with the championship game right around the corner, it would be dramatically influential for somebody in her position to come out and say, you know what I said because I felt a lot of public pressure, but I want to correct the record. I would love to see her say that. I'd love to see her say that to Zaksheske from Outkick. Make sure
No,
you
you got it right every time, and then
yeah.
you called me Zan.
No, I did. Well, I
You
was
added a Z to my first name.
well,
Annie, we were
I
there. We
think
had
I
it.
think the alliteration of Zan and Zaksheske is better for you, and I think you should transition into a Zan,
Oh,
Dan.
careful.
Make you could like dress real cool and just walk around and introduce yourself as Zan, and people would think that you know things in today's culture. I believe that's crazy. We appreciate you. Thanks for being on with us. Thanks for asking that question too, because the conversation is being had right now, and I hope that it moves us a little bit further into an era of common sense.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Come back again. We appreciate you. Outkick.com. That's Dan Zaksheske, his alter ego, Zan Daksheske. Just flip it around. Great to have him on the show and to partner up with him.